Welcome to my channel, where we will delve into the life and genius of Ludwig van Beethoven, one of the greatest composers in history. If you are a classical music lover or simply interested in the man behind these timeless masterpieces, you have come to the right place. Hit the subscribe button and join me on this musical journey through Beethoven's incredible story, his challenges, and his unforgettable symphonies. Let's get inspired by Beethoven's genius together. Musical score. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. I don't even know how to start this except to say, I'm Ludwig. Yeah, that Ludwig. Beethoven. The dun guy. And my life? Let's just say it's been a damn opera lately. I'm writing this because I need to get this off my chest, and I figured strangers on the internet might give me more honest advice than the smug nobles at court. I might be deaf, but apparently I'm the last one to hear the truth. So here's the background. I married Elise. Yes, that Elise. Though spoiler alert, she doesn't deserve a bagpipe dirge, let alone a piano piece. When we first met, she was fiery, brilliant, and had this laugh that lit up the room. I was captivated. She said she loved my mind, my music, my intensity. I thought we were this passionate, artistic power couple. What a joke. First signs of trouble started a few months ago. I was deep into the ninth, this huge, soul-consuming symphony. I was up late most nights, pacing around like a lunatic, scribbling notes I couldn't even hear. Meanwhile, Elise stopped showing up to my rehearsals. She used to sit right up front. I told myself she was just giving me space. Then she started doing this thing where she'd leave in the middle of the day to take the dog for a walk. We don't have a dog. We've never had a dog. I'd ask, walk what, exactly? She'd smile that fake little smile and say, oh, you know, the neighbor's dog. Clara's poodle. It's good for me to get fresh air. That would have made sense if Clara hadn't moved to Vienna last spring. It was the little things, her perfume changing, her sudden interest in wearing corsets again, coming home giggling with leaves in her hair and her stockings twisted. I even found an open bottle of wine in the piano bench. She said she was trying to be romantic, except it was my brandy she hated and his wine she liked. I ignored it, or tried to, because I was so focused on finishing the ninth. It felt like it would be my legacy. I was too wrapped up in immortality to notice the mess in my own bed. More to come. It gets worse. Way worse. So. About a week after the wine incident, I was trying to find a sketch I'd made for the choral finale. I keep my drafts in this little drawer under the harpsichord, and while rummaging through, I found a folded piece of parchment that wasn't mine. It reeked of sandalwood and arrogance. I opened it. It was a letter. A love letter. From some loser named F.W. The writing was sloppy, rushed, and filled with crap like, I long for your touch, your wicked little laugh in the mornings. I can't wait for Ludwig to leave again. Meet me by the river path. Yours, always, Franz. Franz. Friggin' Franz. Do you know who Franz is? Franz Werder. My copyist. My apprentice. A little talentless bootlicker with floppy hair and mediocre counterpoint. I taught him how to score for strings, and he was apparently scoring my wife at the same time. The worst part? I trusted him. I literally dictated to this man. He knew I couldn't hear. He knew I depended on him. And he was just standing there every day, all innocent, probably snickering behind my back, knowing he was slithering into my marriage like a snake with a lute. I didn't react at first. I just sat there. For maybe 20 minutes? 30? I couldn't even move. The silence was too much. Not just the kind of silence I live with every day, but the kind where you realize the person who's supposed to be your partner is out there mocking everything sacred to you. I put the letter back. I waited. That night, I told her I wanted to spend the evening together. She blinked like I'd just asked her to wrestle a bear. Oh, I have to, help Franz with, binding your manuscripts. You know, your messy ones. Yeah, she actually said that. Binding my manuscripts. At midnight. In a dress cut down to her collarbone. All I said was, of course. Tell him I said hello. She froze. Just for a second. That split second where the face gives away everything before the lies pour in. I watched her leave. And then I started writing again. Not music. Notes, all right. Buckle up. So the next day, I decided I'd had enough of pretending I didn't know. I waited until dinner. She made that watery cabbage soup she always made when she was feeling guilty, like my taste buds were a penance she had to endure. I let her ladle it into the bowl. I let her sit down. I even let her compliment me on how intensely brooding I looked. She always said that when she was trying to distract me, and then I just dropped it. I pulled out the letter from under my cloak, unfolded it, and laid it beside her spoon. She blinked at it, looked up at me, blinked again. Elise, I said, calm as ever, what would you like to tell me? She didn't even flinch. This woman looked me dead in the eye and said, that's not mine. I just stared at her. No expression. Silence. She smirked a little, like I was being dramatic. You really believe I would write something that sappy? You think I'd be that pathetic? Then she flipped the parchment over like she was expecting it to turn into a tax bill or something. I said, it's from Franz. He mentions you by name. She raised an eyebrow. Maybe you wrote it. You've always had a flair for the melodramatic. Yup. She accused me, a deaf composer in the middle of writing the most emotionally demanding piece of music in history, of forging a love letter from my own apprentice to frame her. That was the moment I saw it. Clear as daylight. She was never going to admit it. She'd rather gaslight me into insanity than own up. So I tried a different angle. Then why, I asked, does he come to our home on Sundays when I'm at rehearsal? Her response? Because he's worried about you, Ludwig. You're not well. You're obsessed with music. You're not emotionally available anymore. That hit me like a punch to the throat. She twisted it, made it my fault, for dedicating myself to the only thing that's ever truly been there for me, music. She acted like being passionate, driven, deaf, and intense made her the victim. I don't even remember what I said next. I think I laughed. I actually laughed. Because what else do you do when the person you've trusted with your whole heart is looking at you like you're the madman? She walked out after that. Left her soup on the table. Didn't come back until morning, and she smelled like pipe smoke and old wine. You know that feeling when the air gets sucked out of the room? Like someone punched you in the chest, but it's emotional, not physical? That's what it was like the morning after she came home smelling like a tavern. She didn't say anything. Just walked past me in her wrinkled dress like nothing happened. Poured herself tea, humming like she hadn't just detonated our marriage. I sat there, watching her, and something inside me just snapped. Not in a loud way. Quiet. Still. Like when a violin string pops in the middle of a concert and no one hears it but the player. I think that was the exact moment I stopped loving her. But stopping loving someone doesn't mean the pain goes away. Far from it. The grief comes in like a wave, and you realize you're mourning someone who's still alive, who still shares your bed, who still walks around your house like she owns the air. I stopped composing for 2 weeks. 2 full weeks. Me. The guy who wrote symphonies in the middle of heartbreak, who sketched fugues while coughing up blood. I couldn't even look at the paper. Every time I sat at the piano, all I heard was her laugh echoing in my head. Not the laugh I fell in love with. The one she used when she was mocking me with Franz. I drank. A lot. Not the sophisticated sipping kind either. I'm talking blackout, slapped my own metronome off the table drunk. At one point, I hallucinated that my hearing had returned, just long enough to hear her whisper Franz's name. That messed me up worse than the wine. And still, she stayed. Acted like everything was fine. Talked about hosting dinners, wearing blue to the opera, inviting Countess What's-Her-Face to brunch. Meanwhile, my soul was rotting like a damp manuscript. I started writing again eventually. Not for her. Not for anyone. Just for me. It wasn't music, it was rage. Pure, unfiltered fury stitched into every measure. You think the ninth is uplifting? Think again. That ode to joy is layered with betrayal, heartbreak, and a desperate scream for something pure in a world full of liars. I told no one. But every note? That's my revenge.so. Just when I thought she couldn't sink any lower, Elise decided to throw a party. No joke. A full-blown soiree at our home, with guests, a trio ensemble, wine imported from Italy, and little pastries shaped like goddamn swans. She didn't ask. She just announced it over breakfast while chewing toast like a goat. It'll be good for you, she said. You've been so broody lately. Oh, you mean since I found out you've been hooking up with my apprentice behind my back and gaslighting me into insanity? Sure, Elise, let's have cake. I told her flat out I wasn't in the mood to entertain. Her response? You can sulk in your study if you want, but I'm not going to stop living just because you're sensitive. She said that. Sensitive. Like she hadn't just detonated our marriage and salted the ground. Anyway, the night of the party comes. I'm upstairs. I'm trying not to throw things. And I hear his voice. Franz. That greasy, lute-sniffing bastard. Laughing in my house, drinking my wine, probably standing 6 feet from the harpsichord I paid for. And Elise? She's flirting with him like she forgot I was alive. Lightly touching his wrist when he talks. whispering in his ear while everyone else is pretending not to see. It wasn't even subtle. I'm pretty sure one of the guests applauded at one point. I couldn't take it, so I went downstairs. Walked into that crowd like I was conducting a funeral. Everyone froze. Forks halfway to mouths. Music stopped mid-phrase. All eyes on me, the tragic genius in the doorway. And I said, "Franz, out." He blinked. "Maestro, out. Now." Before I remind everyone that you couldn't harmonize your way out of a two-chord progression without me. The man flushed so hard his ears turned crimson. Elise tried to laugh it off, like I was joking. I turned to her and said, loud and clear, "You invited a man into our home who has no honor and no shame. That tells me you have neither, either." Silence. You could hear a page turn. Franz scurried out like a wet rat. The party dissolved shortly after. Elise stood in the hallway, arms crossed, wine glass still in hand, and said, "You really are a drama queen, Ludwig." I said nothing, just walked past her, and locked the music room behind me. I woke up the next morning on the floor of my music room. My coat was bunched up under my head, and my mouth tasted like brandy and betrayal. I had scrawled something illegible on a staff paper in the middle of the night. Looked like a symphony had been mugged by a thunderstorm. Elise didn't come in. She didn't knock. Didn't leave a note. She made no effort at all to apologize or explain. When I finally emerged, disheveled and probably smelling like I lost a duel to a bottle of cognac, she was in the parlor reading a letter. I thought, for a moment, maybe it was from Franz and that she was finally going to confess or at least say something. But when she saw me, she didn't even flinch. Just folded the letter and said, "You scared our guests. You owe me an apology." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. My ribs actually ached. She gave me this look, half disgust, half condescension, and added, "You used to be passionate, Ludwig. Now you're just bitter." I said, "Bitter men don't write symphonies. They bury people who deserve it." She rolled her eyes and left the room. Later that day, I got a letter of my own from Count Dietrichstein, of all people. He'd heard about the party, the public scene, and the rumor that I'd gone full madman and thrown Franz out like a stray cat. The Count wrote, and I quote, "Please consider the dignity of your profession when resolving domestic affairs." So now my reputation was on the line. Not hers. Not Franz's. Mine. That's when the weight of it all really hit me. Elise had turned not just my home into a performance stage for betrayal, but had manipulated the narrative to make me the villain. I was the difficult husband, the brooding, obsessive genius, the deaf recluse who couldn't keep his wife happy. People were starting to talk. Musicians gossiped during rehearsals. Patrons made awkward small talk. Even my own nephew Carl looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to pity or be afraid of me. And the worst part? I still wanted her to care. Not to stay. Just to care. Just enough to say, "I did this. I hurt you. You didn't deserve it." But she never did. Not then. Not ever. There's always a moment, the moment, where you realize you're not coming back from this. Mine came on a Tuesday. It always does, doesn't it? Not a dramatic Friday. Not a heavy, rainy Sunday. A boring, gray Tuesday when you're halfway through your coffee and realize your entire life is made of lies. Elise had gone out early to the market, which was code, I now suspected, for going to be somewhere I can lie about later. I didn't care anymore, really. Or I told myself I didn't. But then I saw it. She left her desk drawer cracked open, the one she usually locked. I swear it was like the universe leaned in and whispered, "Look." I did. Inside, letters. Some from Franz. Some from others. At least 3 other names I didn't recognize. Wilhelm, Caspar, Anna. Yes, Anna. She'd even lied about being straight. One letter from Wilhelm had a dried flower in it. He called her my cruel little muse. Another one from Anna said, "He doesn't deserve your fire." The kind of stuff you'd read in some overdramatic novel, except this was my actual life. I just sat there, holding those letters like they were burning my hands. My heart wasn't even broken anymore. It was numb, like it had given up reacting. I realized then that I hadn't lost my wife. I never had her. I don't remember walking to the piano, but I was suddenly there, just sitting, staring at the keys. And I played. Loud. Unforgiving. Something jagged and violent that didn't even pretend to be music. I think the neighbors thought I'd gone mad. They weren't entirely wrong. That's when she came home. Stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watched me destroy the keys with a fugue that sounded like thunder drowning a screen. She waited for me to finish, then said, "I knew you'd look." No denial. No apology. Just that smug little smirk she wore when she knew she'd won something. I stood, and I asked her calmly, dangerously, "Is there anyone you haven't lied to?" She didn't flinch, just shrugged and said, "People hear what they want. You heard what you wanted when you married me." I walked out. Not out the room, out the house. I didn't even grab a coat. I walked the entire length of the city, deaf, heart shattered, trying to feel anything. And I realized, out there in the cold Vienna wind, this was the end. Not just of us. Of whatever version of me I've been trying to protect. I came back around midnight. Didn't plan to. Just nowhere else to go. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, dead quiet, like the aftermath of a storm that flattened everything in its path. Elise was in the dining room, still dressed, a single candle burning beside her, as if she expected me to return like some gothic novel character crawling out of the moors. She didn't look at me when I came in, just sipped her wine and said, "I guess you read all of it." I didn't answer. Then finally, she looked at me. And this time, no smirk, no mask. Just tired eyes. Cold, but honest. "I never loved you the way you loved me," she said. I felt that in my spine. She continued, "I loved your music, your intensity, the way everyone looked at you when you walked into a room. But you, Ludwig, you were never really with me. You were always in your head, with your notes, your ghosts." That almost sounded like a confession, but it was wrapped in blame. I said, "And that gives you the right to lie to me for years?" She stared at her glass. "I lied to survive, to not feel invisible. You made me feel like an accessory to your genius, like your talent was the marriage, and I was just there." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. She stood up and walked past me, whispered, "We both used each other. You just thought it was love." And that was the moment I knew it was done. There wasn't going to be some great reconciliation. No breakdown. No ugly crying. Just the sharp truth. She didn't love me, and maybe she never had. It hit me then, not with fire, not with rage, but with a cold kind of finality. Like when you hear a piece of music end and realize it wasn't the ending you hoped for, but it was the only one that made sense. About a week after that midnight truth bomb, I decided to begin sorting through the house. Not because I was ready to move on, but because I couldn't bear the way every room felt like it was haunted by the version of my life I thought I was living. That's when I found the letter. It wasn't in a drawer. Wasn't tucked away in some secret compartment. It had fallen behind the piano. It must have slipped through the crack above the keys. I saw just the corner of the envelope poking out as I was cleaning dust off the floorboard. It was addressed to Elise. From Franz. But it wasn't recent. It was dated 2 years ago. That shook me. I opened it. My hands were trembling. I'll never forget the first line. "I know you said you're not ready to leave him yet, but I can't keep watching you suffer like this." I sat down hard, letter in one hand, heart free falling. It went on. Talked about how they had been planning to run away. That she'd promised Franz she would leave me once my hearing got too bad to be functional. That she felt trapped because I was still composing, still useful, and she didn't want to look like a monster. Too late for that. But the part that gutted me the most? The way he looks at you during rehearsals, he still thinks you're his muse. I really had. All that time, pouring myself into sonatas I thought were carved from love. Me, the fool with a quill and a bleeding heart. Turns out I was just background noise to a plot she'd been orchestrating since before I knew it existed. That letter never made it to her hands. Maybe she dropped it. Maybe she'd read it and tried to hide it and forgot. Either way, it felt like a message from the past, confirming what the present had already beaten into me. I was never the main character in her story, just a well-placed prop. And I wish I could say I tore it up, burned it, did something symbolic. But I didn't. I folded it gently and put it in a drawer of my own. Because now I had secrets too. It was the last time I performed with her in the room. The Philharmonic had organized a private salon event, mostly nobles, stiff-backed patrons, and opportunistic critics. I hadn't intended to go emotionally. I was still raw, but something in me wanted to mark the end with music. Closure, maybe. Elise showed up in red. Not a subtle red. Not evening appropriate. A loud, fire-breathing red dress that practically screamed, "I want to be the scandal." She sat in the second row, legs crossed, wearing that same unreadable half-smile she'd worn the night she told me she'd never loved me properly. Like she wanted to see if I'd fall apart. I didn't. I played. Hard. Not for her. Not for the Dukes. Not for the critics. For me. Every key I struck was a goodbye. Every chord, a reckoning. My fingers flew across the ivory like they'd never get another chance. I bled my anger into the piano. My confusion. My shame. My unfiltered grief. Halfway through the second movement, I swear to God, I forgot she was even there. It wasn't perfect. My hearing betrayed me once or twice, missed cues, ghost notes I thought I heard, but didn't. But I felt it all. And so did the room. When I finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then applause. The kind that starts small and grows like a fire. Elise didn't clap. She just stood and walked out. And I watched her go without feeling anything. No ache. No nostalgia. No regret. Just peace. It was the strangest thing, realizing that music, the very thing she used to latch onto me, was now what finally set me free. After that final performance, the silence between Elise and me grew louder than any symphony. We barely spoke. Our house, once filled with music and tension, became a museum of memories neither of us wanted to revisit. One evening, I found her sitting by the window, staring out at the Vienna skyline like she was searching for an escape route. I sat beside her, heart thudding with a mix of dread and hope. "Are you leaving?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes sharp but tired. "I think it's time," she said simply. No bitterness. No blame. Just a quiet acceptance of what we both knew. The next day, she left. Packed a few bags, took the letters, and didn't look back. For a while, I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. But in that solitude, I started to find myself again. I realized betrayal isn't just about lies or cheating. It's about losing your own sense of worth when the person you trusted decides to rewrite the story. And maybe that's the hardest part, not the betrayal itself, but learning how to be the author of your own life after someone else ripped your pages out. If you're reading this and going through something similar, my advice is, don't let anyone else's story drown out your voice. Keep composing. Keep fighting. And don't ever let someone else's lies silence your truth. About 2 months after Elise left, I got a letter, not one of hers, this time. It was from Franz. Yeah, the same Franz from those letters I'd found. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of cruel joke or a trap. But curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. He wrote that he wanted to meet. Said he wanted to clear the air, tell me some things I deserved to know. That despite everything, he felt some responsibility toward me. Something about closure and honesty. I wasn't sure if I should be angry or intrigued. Honestly, I just wanted answers, even if they hurt. The letter ended with a place and time, an old cafe in the heart of Vienna. I debated not going. A part of me wanted to leave the past buried, but another part craved the truth, no matter how ugly. So I went. Sitting there across from Franz, the tension was thicker than the blackest night. And what he told me, well, that's for the next part. Sitting across from Franz in that dim cafe, I expected anger, excuses, maybe even threats. What I got was something I never saw coming, honesty. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Elise, she's not what you think she is." I blinked, waiting for the usual lies. "She's a master manipulator, Ludwig. Not just with you, but with everyone. She twisted everyone's feelings to her advantage." He went on to say Elise had been playing a game far bigger than just us, a web of lies to secure status, money, and power through anyone who could get her closer to the top. He admitted to being one of many caught in her spell, but insisted he genuinely cared for her before realizing she was dangerous. "She used your music, your fame, and even your kindness to hide her true self," Franz said quietly. For the first time, I saw Elise not as my wife, but as a person I barely knew, hiding behind a mask that fooled me for years. Franz ended with a warning. "Be careful if she ever tries to come back. She's good at pretending she's changed, but she's still the same." That night, I left the cafe feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I wasn't alone in this. He confirmed what I feared, but also made me see the bigger picture. Heavier because the truth was more complicated than betrayal. It was about realizing the person you loved was someone else entirely. After meeting with Franz, I finally felt like the fog was lifting, but it wasn't magic. It was hard work. For weeks, I stayed away from everything that reminded me of Elise. The house was too full of ghosts. The music felt like a double-edged sword, both my salvation and my curse. I threw myself into composing, not to escape, but to rebuild myself. Slowly, I started writing again, not songs about heartbreak or betrayal, but about strength, resilience, and hope. Friends noticed the change. They saw the shadow lift from my eyes. I even began to open up in ways I never thought I could. I learned that healing isn't linear. There were days when grief hit like a storm and days when I felt almost free. But each day, I kept moving forward. And the strangest thing? I found peace not by forgetting Elise or pretending nothing happened, but by accepting the pain as part of my story, a chapter that made me who I am. If you're reading this and dealing with betrayal, know this. You can rebuild. It's messy, it's painful, but it's possible. You're worth the effort. So here I am, not the same man I was before Elise, but someone stronger for having survived. I've learned that love can be messy, unpredictable, and sometimes downright cruel. But it can also teach you the deepest truths about yourself. I'm still composing, still pouring my soul into music. But now, I do it for me, not for anyone else's approval or affection. And as for Elise, I don't hate her. Not anymore. She was a chapter, painful and unforgettable, but a chapter nonetheless. My advice to anyone stuck in the storm of betrayal: don't rush healing. Let yourself feel every emotion, but don't lose sight of your own worth. Don't let someone else's lies silence your truth. Keep creating, keep living, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. Because the best symphony you'll ever write is the one where you reclaim your own life. Thanks for listening, Reddit. This was harder than any sonata, but maybe sharing it will help someone else find their strength too. Ludwig.